The crystal chandelier sparkled overhead, casting prismatic reflections across the polished marble floor of the Hartley mansion. Evelyn Hartley stood before the full-length mirror in her bedroom, her fingers tracing the intricate lace pattern of the wedding gown she wore. It was a masterpiece of design, with a fitted bodice adorned with pearls and a flowing train that pooled at her feet like liquid moonlight. By all accounts, she should have felt like a princess. Instead, she felt suffocated. "You look absolutely stunning, darling," her mother Vivian cooed as she entered the room. Her Louboutin heels clicked against the hardwood floor, the sound sharp and decisive, much like the woman herself. "Richard will be speechless when he sees you walking down the aisle." Evelyn's reflection stared back at her, green eyes dull with resignation. "Mom, Now. Vivian cut her off, adjusting a stray curl of Evelyn's chestnut hair. "We've been over this. The Caldwells are a respectable family, and this union will solidify the merger between your father's company and theirs. It's a win-win situation." A win for everyone but me, Evelyn thought bitterly. She turned away from the mirror, facing her mother directly. "I don't love him, Mom. I barely know him. How can you expect me to spend the rest of my life with someone I've only met at a handful of business dinners?" Vivian's perfectly manicured hand waved dismissively in the air. "Love is a luxury, Evelyn. Security, stability, status. These are the foundations of a good marriage. Your father and I have given you everything. Is it so much to ask that you do this one thing for the family?" The weight of expectation pressed down on Evelyn's shoulders, heavier than any wedding gown. She thought of her childhood dreams, of becoming a writer, of traveling the world, of finding a love that made her heart race. Those dreams seemed to be slipping through her fingers like sand. "I can't do this," Evelyn whispered, more to herself than to her mother. Vivian's eyes narrowed, her voice taking on a steely edge. "You can, and you will. Do you have any idea how much this wedding has cost us? How many important people will be attending? This isn't just about you, Evelyn. It's about securing the future of Hartley Industries." A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Gregory Hartley, Evelyn's father, entered the room, his imposing figure filling the doorway. His salt and pepper hair was immaculately styled, and his tailored suit spoke of wealth and influence. "How are my two favorite women doing?" he asked, his booming voice filling the room. His eyes fell on Evelyn, and a proud smile spread across his face. "You look beautiful, Princess. The Caldwell boy won't know what hit him." Evelyn felt a lump form in her throat. Her father had always called her princess, but today the endearment felt hollow. She was no princess, she was a pawn in a game of corporate chess. "Dad," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I need to talk to you about the wedding. I don't think I can—" Gregory's smile faltered, replaced by a look of concern. "What's the matter, sweetheart? Pre-wedding jitters? It's perfectly normal, you know." Evelyn took a deep breath, steeling herself. "It's not jitters, Dad. I don't want to marry Richard. I don't love him, and I can't see myself building a life with him." The room fell silent. Vivian's face paled, while Gregory's brow furrowed deeply. When he spoke again, his voice was low and controlled, but Evelyn could hear the underlying anger. "Evelyn, we've invested everything in this merger. The wedding is the final piece of the puzzle. You can't back out now." "But Dad, what about what I want? What about my happiness?" Evelyn pleaded, feeling like a little girl again, begging for her father's understanding. Gregory's expression hardened. "Sometimes we have to make sacrifices for the greater good. This marriage will secure jobs for hundreds of employees, expand our charitable foundations, and set you up for life. Isn't that worth something?" Tears welled up in Evelyn's eyes. "And what about love? What about following my own path?" Her father's next words fell like a gavel, sealing her fate. "If you refuse to go through with this wedding, you can forget about your inheritance. No more trust fund, no more cushy job at the company. You'll be on your own." Evelyn felt as though the air had been sucked out of the room. She looked from her father to her mother, searching for any sign of sympathy, any flicker of understanding. She found none. In that moment, standing in a wedding gown that felt more like a straitjacket, Evelyn realized that the gilded cage of her privileged life had finally snapped shut. The choice before her was clear: conform to her parents' wishes and live a life of comfort and emptiness, or risk everything for a chance at true happiness. As the first tear rolled down her cheek, smudging her carefully applied makeup, Evelyn knew that her life would never be the same after this day. The question was, would she have the courage to change it? The days leading up to the wedding passed in a blur of fittings, rehearsals, and tense family dinners. Evelyn felt like a spectator in her own life, watching helplessly as the elaborate plans unfolded around her. Each night she tossed and turned in her bed, her mind racing with thoughts of escape and consequences. On the eve of the wedding, Evelyn found herself in the Hartley family library, a sanctuary she had loved since childhood. The room smelled of old leather and paper, a comforting scent that usually calmed her nerves. Tonight, however, not even the familiar surroundings could ease the turmoil in her heart. She ran her fingers along the spines of the books, pausing at a worn copy of Jane Eyre. Evelyn pulled it from the shelf, remembering how she had devoured the story as a teenager, admiring Jane's strength and independence. What would Jane do in my situation? She wondered. There you are, a voice called from the doorway. Evelyn turned to see her best friend, Mia, leaning against the frame. I've been looking all over for you. Mia crossed the room, her dark curls bouncing with each step. She plopped down on the leather sofa, patting the spot next to her. Sit! We need to talk. Evelyn sighed, joining her friend. If you're here to give me a pep talk about the wedding, save your breath. I've heard enough from my parents. Mia's brown eyes softened with concern. Actually, I'm here to ask you one question. Are you really going to go through with this? The directness of the question caught Evelyn off guard. She opened her mouth to give the rehearsed answer she'd been repeating to everyone for weeks, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she felt tears welling up in her eyes. Oh, Evie, Mia whispered, pulling her friend into a tight hug. I know you. This isn't you. You're the girl who backpacked through Europe after college, who writes beautiful stories, who dreams of changing the world. How can you give all that up for a loveless marriage? Evelyn pulled back, wiping her eyes. You don't understand, Mia. If I don't do this, I lose everything. My family, my inheritance, my whole life as I know it. Mia shook her head, her voice firm. No, you lose your golden handcuffs. There's a difference. She took Evelyn's hands in hers. Remember when we were kids and we made that pact to always follow our hearts, no matter what? What happened to that brave little girl? The words struck a chord deep within Evelyn. She thought back to her younger self, full of dreams and determination. When had she let that fire die out? I'm scared, Evelyn admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Of course you are, Mia replied. But you know what's scarier? Living a life that isn't yours. Waking up every day next to someone you don't love. Working at a job that doesn't fulfill you. Always wondering, what if? Evelyn stood up abruptly, pacing the room. Her mind was racing, possibilities and fears colliding. Even if I wanted to leave, where would I go? What would I do? Mia's eyes lit up. Remember my aunt's beach house in Oregon? The one where we spent that amazing summer after graduation? It's empty right now. You could stay there, figure things out. The idea was both terrifying and exhilarating. Evelyn's heart raced at the thought of escaping, of starting fresh. But the weight of expectation, of duty, still pressed heavily on her shoulders. My parents would never forgive me, she murmured. Mia stood up, placing her hands on Evelyn's shoulders. Maybe not right away, but if they truly love you, they'll come around. And if they don't, well, then maybe they don't deserve you. Evelyn took a deep breath, feeling as though she stood on the edge of a cliff. One step forward, and everything would change. One step back, and she'd be trapped forever. If I do this, she said slowly, I'll need your help. Mia's face broke into a wide grin. Say no more. Operation Runaway Bride is a go. Pack light, bring cash, and meet me at the back gate at midnight. I'll handle the rest. As Mia left to make preparations, Evelyn stood alone in the library, her heart pounding. She looked around the room, taking in the familiar sights. The family portraits on the walls, the antique globe in the corner, the shelf of business books her father had always encouraged her to read. For a moment, doubt crept in. Could she really leave all this behind? Then her eyes fell on the copy of Jane Eyre, still clutched in her hand. She opened it to a random page and read, I am no bird, and no net ensnares me. I am a free human being with an independent will. In that moment, Evelyn knew what she had to do. With trembling hands, she began to write 2 letters, one to her parents and one to Richard. She poured her heart out onto the pages, explaining her decision, asking for understanding, if not forgiveness. As the grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 11, Evelyn took one last look around her bedroom. She changed out of her silk pajamas into jeans and a sweater, stuffed a backpack with essentials, and tucked an envelope of cash into her pocket. At 5 minutes to midnight, she crept down the back stairs, her heart in her throat. As she reached for the door handle, she hesitated, her hand hovering in midair. This was her last chance to turn back, to slip into bed and wake up tomorrow as the dutiful daughter, the blushing bride. The thought made her feel ill. Taking a deep breath, Evelyn opened the door and stepped out into the cool night air. For the first time in months, she felt like she could breathe freely. As she hurried towards the back gate where Mia waited, Evelyn realized she was smiling. The road ahead was uncertain, but for once, it was hers to choose. The headlights of Mia's beat-up Volkswagen cut through the darkness as they sped down the coastal highway. Evelyn sat in the passenger seat, her backpack clutched tightly to her chest like a lifeline. The events of the past few hours felt surreal, as if she were watching someone else's life unfold. "You okay?" Mia asked, glancing over with concern. Evelyn nodded, not trusting her voice. She stared out the window, watching as the familiar landscape of her hometown gave way to unfamiliar territory. With each passing mile, the reality of her decision began to sink in. "I can't believe I actually did it," she whispered, more to herself than to Mia. Mia reached over and squeezed her hand. "I'm proud of you, Evie. It takes guts to do what you did." As they drove through the night, Lynn's mind wandered to the chaos she had left behind. By now, her parents would have discovered her absence and the letters she had left. She imagined her mother's hysterics, her father's rage. The thought made her stomach churn. "Maybe I should call them," Evelyn said, reaching for her phone. Mia shook her head firmly. "Not yet. Give it a few days. Let the dust settle." Evelyn knew her friend was right, but the guilt gnawed at her. She had always been the perfect daughter, the one who never caused trouble. Now she had upended everything. As dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, they crossed the Oregon state line. Evelyn felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. She was farther from home than she had ever been on her own. "Almost there," Mia announced as they turned onto a winding road that hugged the coastline. An hour later, they pulled up to a weathered beach house perched on a cliff overlooking the Pacific. The sound of crashing waves filled the air, and the salty breeze whipped Evelyn's hair as she stepped out of the car. "Welcome to your temporary hideout," Mia said with a grin, tossing Evelyn a set of keys. The inside of the house was cozy and lived in, with mismatched furniture and walls adorned with seashells and driftwood art. It was a far cry from the opulent Hartley mansion, but Evelyn found herself drawn to its charm. "The fridge is stocked, there's Wi-Fi, and the nearest town is about a 20-minute drive away," Mia explained, giving her a quick tour. "You sure you'll be okay here by yourself?" Evelyn nodded, touched by her friend's concern. "I'll be fine. I just need some time to think, to figure out my next move." After extracting a promise from Evelyn to call if she needed anything, Mia reluctantly left. As the sound of her car faded away, Evelyn was enveloped in silence. For the first time in her life, she was truly alone. The next few days passed in a blur. Evelyn alternated between long walks on the beach, furious writing sessions at the old desk by the window, and moments of paralyzing doubt where she questioned every decision she had ever made. On the fourth day, as she sat on the porch watching the sunset, her phone buzzed. It was a text from her mother. "Please come home. We need to talk." Evelyn's heart raced. She had been both dreading and longing for this moment. With trembling fingers, she dialed her home number. Her mother answered on the first ring. "Evelyn? Oh, thank God. Are you all right? Where are you?" The concern in her mother's voice brought tears to Evelyn's eyes. "I'm safe, Mom. I'm sorry I worried you, but I couldn't go through with the wedding. I just couldn't." There was a long pause. When Vivian spoke again, her voice was softer than Evelyn had ever heard it. "I know, sweetheart. Your father and we've done a lot of thinking since you left. We realized we were so focused on what we wanted for you that we forgot to ask what you wanted for yourself." Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. "Really?" "Really," her mother confirmed. "We miss you, Evelyn, and we're sorry. Can you forgive us?" Tears streamed down Evelyn's face as relief and love washed over her. "Of course, Mom. I love you both so much." "We love you too, Princess," her father's voice came on the line. "And we're proud of you for standing up for yourself. It takes real courage to do what you did." They talked for over an hour, clearing the air and beginning to rebuild the trust that had been damaged. By the end of the call, plans were made for Evelyn to return home in a few days. As she hung up, Evelyn felt as though a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She looked out at the vast ocean before her, feeling for the first time that her future was as wide open and full of possibilities as the horizon. That night, she dreamed of writing a novel, of traveling to far off places, of finding a love that set her soul on fire. And for once, these dreams didn't feel like distant fantasies. They felt like a roadmap to the life she was meant to live. In the morning, Evelyn woke early and walked down to the beach. As the sun rose over the water, she made a promise to herself. No matter what challenges lay ahead, she would face them with courage and stay true to her heart. The journey wouldn't be easy, but it would be hers. And that made all the difference. The familiar skyline of Boston came into view as Evelyn's plane began its descent. Her stomach fluttered with a mix of anticipation and nervousness. The past week at the beach house had been transformative, giving her time to reflect, heal, and gather her courage. Now, as she returned home, she felt like a different person, stronger, more self assured, but also acutely aware of the bridges she needed to mend. As she exited the terminal, Evelyn spotted her parents waiting for her. Her mother's eyes were red rimmed, and her father looked more disheveled than she had ever seen him. The sight of them, vulnerable, human, made her heart ache. "Mom, Dad!" she called out, quickening her pace. They embraced in a tangle of arms and tears, oblivious to the bustling airport around them. For a moment, no words were necessary. The love and relief were palpable. "We're so sorry, sweetheart," her father murmured into her hair. "We never meant to push you so hard." Evelyn pulled back, wiping her eyes. "Huh? I'm sorry too. I should have talked to you sooner instead of running away." The drive home was filled with tentative conversation, each of them trying to navigate this new dynamic. As they pulled up to the Hartley mansion, Evelyn was struck by how different it looked to her now, less like a prison and more like a place of possibility. Inside, they settled in the living room, the weight of unspoken words hanging in the air. Gregory cleared his throat, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "Evelyn, your mother and I have been doing a lot of thinking," he began. "We realize now that we've been so focused on the family legacy that we lost sight of what's truly important, your happiness." Vivian nodded, reaching out to take Evelyn's hand. "We've called off the merger with the Caldwells. It wasn't worth losing you over." Evelyn's eyes widened in surprise. "But what about Hartley Industries? The expansion plans?" Her father shrugged, a wry smile on his face. "We'll find another way. The company's strong enough to weather this. Besides, I've been thinking it might be time to start stepping back, let some fresh blood take the reins." "What are you saying, Dad?" Evelyn asked, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "I'm saying that if you want it, there's a place for you at the company. Not as a figurehead or to fulfill some dynastic plan, but to bring your own ideas and vision. Only if that's what you want, of course." Evelyn sat back, her mind reeling. A week ago, the idea of joining the family business had felt like a cage. Now, with the freedom to choose, she found herself intrigued by the possibilities. I I don't know what to say," she admitted. "I need some time to think about it." "Of course," her mother said quickly. "There's no rush. We want you to do whatever makes you happy." As the conversation flowed more easily, Evelyn felt a warmth spreading through her chest. They talked about her time at the beach house, her writing, and her dreams for the future. For the first time in years, she felt truly heard by her parents. Later that evening, as Evelyn unpacked in her room, there was a knock at the door. Her father entered, holding a small, wrapped package. "I found this while you were away," he said, handing it to her. "I think it belongs to you." Curious, Evelyn unwrapped it to find a worn, leather-bound journal. She gasped as she recognized it. Her old writing journal from high school, filled with stories and dreams she had long forgotten. "I read some of it," her father admitted sheepishly. "You have a real talent, Princess. I'm sorry I never encouraged it before." Tears pricked Evelyn's eyes as she hugged her father tightly. "Thank you, Dad. This means more than you know." That night, Evelyn stayed up late, rediscovering her old stories and beginning to write new ones. As she wrote, an idea began to form, a way to combine her passion for storytelling with her family's business acumen. The next morning, she approached her parents at breakfast, her eyes bright with excitement. "I've been thinking about your offer, Dad," she began. "What if we started a publishing division at Hartley Industries?" We could focus on new voices, diverse stories. It would be a way to give back to the community and nurture creativity. Her parents exchanged surprised looks before breaking into smiles. That's actually a brilliant idea, her father said, pride evident in his voice. It would be a whole new direction for the company, and it would be all yours to develop, her mother added. If that's what you want, of course. Evelyn nodded, feeling a surge of confidence. It is. I want to build something meaningful, something that's true to who I am. As they began to discuss the details, Evelyn felt a sense of purpose she had never experienced before. She knew the road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time, she was excited about her role in the family business. That evening, as the Hartleys sat down to dinner together, there was a newfound warmth and understanding between them. They laughed, shared stories, and made plans for the future, not as business partners or out of obligation, but as a family united by love and mutual respect. As Evelyn looked around the table, she realized that sometimes running away wasn't about escaping, but about finding the courage to return and create the life you truly want. She had taken a leap into the unknown, and in doing so, had found her way home, to herself, and to a family that now understood the true meaning of success. 6 months had passed since Evelyn's dramatic return home, and the Hartley household buzzed with a new energy. The dining room, once a place of tense business discussions, had been transformed into a makeshift boardroom for Evelyn's fledgling publishing division. Evelyn sat at the head of the table, surrounded by stacks of manuscripts and marketing plans. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she wore a comfortable sweater instead of the stuffy suits she once dreaded. She looked up as her father entered the room, carrying 2 steaming mugs of coffee. "How's it going, Princess?" Gregory asked, setting a mug in front of her. Evelyn smiled, gratitude warming her chest. "It's challenging, but in all the right ways. We've just signed our first author, a brilliant new voice in fiction. I can't wait for you to read her work." Gregory beamed with pride. "I'm sure it's excellent. You've always had an eye for talent." He paused, his expression growing serious. "Listen, I wanted to talk to you about something. The board meeting is next week, and I think it's time we officially announced your position as head of Hartley Publishing." Evelyn's eyes widened. "Are you sure? It's only been 6 months." "I've never been more sure of anything," Gregory affirmed. "You've breathed new life into this company, Evelyn. The energy, the creativity you've brought. It's exactly what Hartley Industries needed." Tears pricked at Evelyn's eyes as she stood to hug her father. "Thank you, Dad, for believing in me, for giving me the space to find my own way." As they broke apart, Vivian entered the room, a knowing smile on her face. "Am I interrupting a moment?" "Just telling our daughter how proud we are of her," Gregory replied, his arm still around Evelyn's shoulders. Vivian's eyes softened. "We certainly are. Oh, before I forget, Mia called. She wanted to know if you were free for dinner tonight. Something about celebrating your first book launch?" Evelyn grinned. "I almost forgot. Our first title hits shelves today." She glanced at her watch. "I should head to the office for the final preparations. Will you both join us for dinner later?" "We wouldn't miss it for the world," Vivian assured her. As Evelyn gathered her things, she paused at the door, looking back at her parents. The change in their relationship over the past months had been profound. Where once there had been pressure and expectations, now there was support and understanding. "I love you both," she said softly. "We love you too, sweetheart," they replied in unison. The autumn air was crisp as Evelyn drove to the Hartley publishing offices. The leaves were turning, painting the city in vibrant hues of red and gold. As she walked into the bustling office, she was greeted by the excited chatter of her team. "There she is," Mia called out, rushing over to envelop Evelyn in a hug. "The woman of the hour. How does it feel to be launching your first book?" Evelyn laughed, her eyes shining. "Terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. I still can't quite believe we're here." As the day progressed, Evelyn found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The scared young woman who had run away from an unwanted marriage seemed like a distant memory. In her place stood a confident leader, pursuing her passion and making a difference in the literary world. That evening, as Evelyn stood addressing the small crowd gathered for the book launch party, she felt a sense of completion. Her parents beamed at her from the front row, while Mia gave her an encouraging thumbs up from the side. "6 months ago, I thought I knew what my future held," Evelyn began. I was wrong, but in taking a leap into the unknown, I found my true path. This book, or she held up a copy of their debut novel, represents not just the incredible talent of our author, but the power of following your heart and the importance of second chances. As applause filled the room, Evelyn caught her father's eye. He nodded, a silent acknowledgement of how far they had come. Later, as the party wound down, Evelyn found a quiet moment alone. She stepped out onto the balcony, gazing at the city lights twinkling below. The cool night air carried the promise of new beginnings. A gentle hand on her shoulder made her turn. It was her mother, holding 2 glasses of champagne. I thought you might need this, Vivian said, offering her a glass. You were magnificent tonight, darling. Evelyn took the glass, clinking it gently against her mother's. Thanks, Mom, for everything. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping their champagne. You know, Vivian said softly, watching you today, I realized something. All those years, your father and I thought we were preparing you for success. But the truth is, you've taught us what real success looks like. Evelyn felt tears welling up in her eyes. What do you mean? Success isn't just about money or power, Vivian explained. It's about being true to yourself, about creating something meaningful. You've shown us that, Evelyn, and we couldn't be more proud. As they embraced, Evelyn felt a profound sense of peace wash over her. The road ahead was still uncertain, filled with challenges and opportunities. But she knew now that she had the strength to face whatever came her way, and a family that would support her every step of the journey. The night breeze carried the faint scent of possibility, and Evelyn smiled into the darkness. This wasn't an ending, she realized. It was just the beginning of a new chapter, one she was excited to write.